Welcome to our third Emerging Ideas event of 2022. My name is Shannon Watson. I'm the founder and executive director of Majority in the Middle. If this is your first introduction to our group, welcome. The goal of Majority in the Middle is to make our political and civic culture better by identifying ways that partisanship and division have become the norm. We're asking a lot of questions about why things are the way they are, and we're looking for places where division exists and wondering if it needs to. And we're hosting a space for people who are interested in politics to gather in the middle without blame for being on one side or the other, and without being asked to give up their own beliefs and priorities. I've personally really been looking forward to this conversation. I want to thank you all for joining us. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. You've probably already noticed that this Zoom is in meeting mode, not webinar mode. So you do have the potential to be on camera or on mic. Go ahead and take a second, mute yourself if you haven't already. And we're going to spotlight the speakers, so they should be taking up the majority of your screen. So it's up to you whether you leave your camera on or off for this portion. We do encourage social media interaction during the event. Use hashtag emerging ideas. I'll be serving as the moderator today. I have a handful of questions prepared, but we also want to get to as many audience questions as we can. So if you have a question, it's best to put it in the chat, and we'll go to those throughout the program. The event is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our YouTube page sometime in the near future. We have until 1 o'clock with our panelists, but as is tradition, we will also be leaving the Zoom room open for up to a half an hour after the event to give you all a chance to network or give feedback or continue the discussion. So I think that's all. Let's get to it. Our discussion today focuses on editorial pages, and we are really lucky to have three of Minnesota's most influential editors with us today. Mike Burbach, editor and vice president of the St. Paul Pioneer Press, lives in St. Paul with his wife and 3 daughters. A journalist for 40 years since his start at the University of North Dakota student newspaper. He's worked in newsrooms in the Dakotas, Michigan, Georgia, Ohio, and for the past 16 years in St. Paul. In his youth, I love this, he also worked delivering newspapers, bagging groceries, hoeing sugar beets, planting potatoes, as a road construction laborer, house framer, rental car agent, waiter, and bartender. Throughout the years, he's been active in efforts related to openness in government and diversity. Harry Colbert Jr. is the managing editor of MinnPost, joining that newsroom in January. Prior, he was North News editor-in-chief, where the publication was awarded 3 Minnesota Society of Professional Journalists Awards and 5 2021 Minnesota Newspaper Association First Place Awards, including the individual award for best column. Colbert is the recipient of an additional 4 Minnesota Newspaper Association Awards, 3 National Newspaper Publishers Association Merit Awards, and 3 National Association of Black Journalists Salute to Excellence nominations. He has contributed as a reporter, columnist, and editor for such outlets as the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's The Village, Insight News, Suburban Journals, St. Louis American, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Joplin Globe, Metro Networks, and KDHX. Scott Gillespie is the Star Tribune's editorial page editor and vice president. He's responsible for opinion content and leads the editorial board, which operates independently from the newsroom. Gillespie has been editorial page editor since 2007. He was the lead editor on Not This Mine, Not This Location, an editorial project on mining near the BWCA that was honored as a Pulitzer Prize finalist in 2020, as well as Separate and Unequal, a series of editorials on underfunded Bureau of Indian Education schools that was a finalist for 2015 Pulitzer. Before joining Star Tribune Opinion, Gillespie was managing editor at the Star Tribune, where he's worked since 1991. He has more than 40 years of journalism experience as a reporter and editor in Minnesota and Wisconsin. He served as Pulitzer Prize juror 4 times and taught news reporting as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Minnesota. Please help me welcome our guests. Yay! Okay, so let's start with some of the basics. Editorial staffing can be different depending on how your company is organized. So let's hear from each of you about who does what at your paper. Let's start with Scott and then go to Mike and then Harry.
Thank you, and really pleased to be here, Shannon. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to all of you who are on the call. At Star Tribune Opinion, we have sort of a traditional newspaper structure. Bigger papers in particular tend to separate news and opinion, and we do that at the Star Tribune. So I have a staff of 10 full and part-time people. That's a combination of editorial writers, editors, and then our cartoonist, Steve Sack. And we are responsible for the two opinion pages that you see in the print edition every day, the editorial page and the opinion exchange page. We're responsible for the social media content on Star Tribune opinion channels, and also StarTribuneOpinion.com, our website, and digital content there. We do a daily newsletter. We do a podcast with WCCO every week called Playing Politics. And that group of people who I mentioned, some are devoted to editorial writing full time. That's about 4 of those folks. And others are are editors of commentary and letters to the editor, and also copy editors for our content. And we can talk more about that as we go along, but that's the basic structure. Like I said, we're independent of the newsroom, so I don't know what the newsroom is doing until I read it, and they don't know what we're doing until they read us. So if people have questions about that later, I can answer them. That's the Star Tribune.
Thanks, Scott. The Pioneer Press is a much smaller operation. So really the opinion page staff, you're looking at them. That would be me. I'm also editor of the paper, so I do know what the newsroom is doing, and I do know what we're doing on the side. Mostly what we do on opinion these days, as we have had to tighten down because of the business operation, or the business, basically our revenue crisis, has to do with op-eds, syndicated columns, and local op-eds. And I spend a fair amount of time sometimes soliciting, sometimes managing, always editing local op-eds and the other stuff too. It's really the best part of the opinion job for me now, because we get to interact with a variety of people with a variety of opinions and attempt to make those opinions stronger and clearer for the benefit of somebody who might or might not agree with whatever that person has to say. My aim when I'm editing an op-ed, a guest column from somebody, is that when we're done, people, whether they agree or not, can say, that was worthwhile. I'm glad I read that. That's basically it.
Great. Harry?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. I am about 2 months into my role at MinnPost. I was at North News prior, and as the managing editor, I'm over the opinion page that we have with MinnPost. That being said, we have one columnist, Eric Black, who submits political commentary, and the majority of our opinion page consists of the citizens of the Minnesota, Twin Cities, and Greater Minnesota. So basically, we get submissions through our Voices email, and the page is called Community Voices. We get submissions through the Voices email, and I ferret through those submissions and try to make sure that we're pulling on, if there's anything that's time sensitive, moving that up to the top if it's related to a specific topic, say for instance, the teacher strike or something like that. But then there are also some other evergreen topics that we cover, and those I kind of plot out through the week. And that pretty much, once again, like Mike, we're a small operation, small but mighty at MinnPost. So my reach is both on the editorial and news side as well. And then also we do have one other weekly contribution that's a little bit of a hybrid between news and opinion, and that's our DC memo that comes out of our DC correspondent.
Awesome. So I love that we have multiple sort of structures. Makes it easy for you guys to have different answers on different questions. So Ben put one in the chat. Can you each talk about the vetting process for op-eds submitted by outside writers? Is it different if that person is a public official versus a private citizen? And does POV matter? Whoever wants to take that one first.
I can take it because we do get a lot of submissions from individuals who either hold office or are seeking to hold office. And I am very careful to make sure that we are not being used as a propaganda wing for that particular candidate. Basically, if the opinion that is being shared is of merit and is of greater value to our overall readership, then and we will run it. We have done so recently in the past, and it's making sure that it's not supporting a person, but addressing an issue, topic, or platform.
I'll jump in and be brief. We approach it pretty much the same way as Harry described. I have lots of conversations with people and say, you can certainly make that case for your political party or your candidate, but you need to buy an ad to do it. You know, on the stuff we publish for free, the vetting question, regarding the vetting question, it is somewhat different for a public official and a private citizen, but only if I know where they're coming from. You know, if it's somebody who I don't know at all, we have to talk some more and try to figure out what they're particularly smart about so the opinion piece can reflect that. If it's a public official, generally the editing vetting process includes some questions by me that I anticipate readers might have. So that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Scott?
Yeah, I wanted to just for a second talk about how we pick what we publish. We get dozens of commentaries submitted by community members, people in Minnesota generally every week. And we're sorting through those for the best commentary and the most timely commentary. We're also looking at our syndicated content in the New York Times and others, Bloomberg, et cetera, for the most timely and relevant commentary we can find. Some of that finds its way into print. Even more of it finds its way to our website. When we're picking, we're looking at, is it relevant? Is it timely? Is the person bring expertise to the argument? Is it well written, obviously, engaging? Is the point of view clear? That's a big thing that we emphasize. We want to see a strong point of view in an opinion piece. And then we're looking for solid data. We're looking for sourcing, trying to gauge accuracy of the argument, what's underpinning the argument the person's making on an issue. We do get a fair number from public officials, not just politicians, but in government people, but also I would even expand that to say, big companies and people who have the money to hire PR people to work with them on commentary. I don't know that we necessarily gauge those any differently. We have told many public officials and people in power that we're just not interested in what they have to write. And we've told people we've never heard of before, just down the block, that we want to publish what they've written because we think it's particularly helpful and constructive in discussions of issues in Minnesota. To kind of emphasize that, we a few months back launched something we call New Voices, which is an invitation to people who've never written for us before, because it can be intimidating to put yourself out there and put your name on something and to go through the process. And so we set up something called New Voices for first-time commentary writers. And we have a part-time editor who's devoted to that, Maggie Kelly. And she works with our commentary editor, DJ Tice, and our assistant commentary editor, David Banks. And so if you go to StarTribune.com opinion, you'll find a section there called New Voices. And you can see I think now it's 6 or 7 that we've published so far. And we're always on the lookout for more. And want to make it clear to people that we're not trying to run the same writers again and again, although we do have some people who are somewhat regular contributors.
So sort of as a follow-up to that, Harry, you had a piece in your, authored by you in the Community Voices section, it was about a month ago. How did you decide to be the speaker on that particular issue?
Because the way MinnPost is set up, we don't necessarily have an editorial section. And coming from North News and prior to that, Insight News, I was always a commentator and editorial writer, and I felt that my voice needed to be heard on this particular issue, and the issue was the police killing of Amir Locke. And it's something that unfortunately I've covered all too many times, having reported on the killings of so many prior, Jamar Clark, Philando Castile, George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others. And so I was looking at it as the perspective, not as Harry Colbert Jr., the journalist, but Harry Colbert Jr., the Black man who lives in North Minneapolis, who happens to be one of the hundreds of thousands of gun owners in Minnesota, legal gun owners, and the peril that we as Black people find ourselves in when we are both looked at as oftentimes the most likely target of a crime, and also looked at sometimes as, for no other than our outward appearance, as the perpetrator of crime. And I felt very passionate that that voice needed to be heard. So we made the decision to go ahead and put it in our Community Voices section.
That makes sense. Let's see, Jan has a question. It seems the most controversial editorials get the most engagement too. Does that factor into the decision to publish the most controversial opinions?
Most engagement too. Well, I'll jump in there. I don't think we've really make too many decisions based on the fact that we think there's going to be high social media engagement. We do want to be read. That's important to us. And one of the ways that I every year make the case to the publisher for the resources that we do have in opinion is I point to the readership that we have, and it's good, strong readership. The good thing is, at least at the Star Tribune and under the direction of Mike Klingensmith, our publisher, not everything is based on those numbers. And he would rather have us take a reasonable leadership position than publish a steady stream of maybe the most provocative opinions that you could possibly pick just to get clicks. So that's good. My colleagues and I feel comfortable with that. That's the way we want to operate as well. Certainly from time to time, fairly often, we have either an editorial or a commentary where we think before we publish it, this is going to shake things up. We've been doing this a long time and have a pretty good sense of when that's going to happen. So we ask ourselves if it's worth it, if it's adding something to the conversation that's important. And hopefully it is. And hopefully we're not making that decision simply because we know it's going to get high traffic.
Okay, I'm gonna, when I ask a question, if one person answers and somebody else has got something else to contribute, feel free to jump in, or otherwise I'm just gonna go back to the questions. Kim asks, how do you handle opinions or letters where misinformation is shared? Is there a policy on when or how to correct? Is it left alone as opinion and reader beware? Let's start with Harry on that one.
Absolutely not. One of the things that you'll notice in many of our voices is you'll see, because we're an online publication, we can take you straight to the source. So oftentimes if there is a claim that's being made, that portion of our commentary is underlined. It's a hyperlink that'll take you to the backup source. At the end of the day, none of us want to be in the business of spreading misinformation. That is something that we're hypersensitive, and especially in today's time when we as journalists are being called out for something that we don't do, which is being quote unquote fake news and sharing misinformation. It's paramount for us to make sure that we're sharing the most accurate information. You can have an opinion all day long, but we won't allow you to sell us that 2 and 2 is 5.
That makes sense. Let's see. It seems Greater Minnesota, this is from Sandy, it seems Greater Minnesota authors have a tougher time getting attention in the opinion pages of statewide publications. What is the secret sauce to getting a letter published? I think several of our listeners want to know, what's the secret sauce? And in full disclosure, I've had pieces published in all of your publications. I've also had pieces rejected by all of your publications, and many of you have coached me on some pieces, and so I appreciate that. But what's the secret sauce?
Mike?
Yeah, sure. I will address that. I would say that it's clarity, brevity, and relevance. Really, I mean, it's we publish longer stuff too. I tell op-ed writers, the guest column writers, I really don't care about length as long as what you're giving us is clear and strong and concise at any length. But brevity is a virtue, particularly with letters to the editor. Relevance is important, and most of the letters that I reject, we give people a lot of room in letters to the editor, and I think I've published a few that somebody would say, well, that's misinformation, and they would probably be right. I also count on our steady stream of letter writers to, over time, correct the record. But I would say the secret sauce is really clarity, brevity, and relevance, and avoiding cheap shots. You can have an opinion, you can criticize, all of that, but the cheap stuff, just leave it out. I don't care. I don't care what angle it's coming from. Don't call names. Don't be cheap.
I would echo what Harry and Mike have said on that point. Same with us. With letters, we get more than 100 every week, and if there's a big news story that really engages people, it's the hundreds that we're sorting through. And so yeah, brevity is important. We say 300 words or fewer for letters. Timeliness, relevance, fresh insight, and no cheap shots. They're signed, and so we definitely, that's important to us. This isn't online commenting, which is we could do a session just on that at lunch some hour, but please don't invite me. I really like the fact that we still do the traditional signed pieces, both commentary and letters as well. And in terms of outstate, we're looking for it, and we really are trying to get more contributions from around the state. The Star Tribune strategically is trying to do more to increase readership, digital readership in particularly Duluth, Rochester, and St. Cloud. So, we tend to actually give some more points to the letters and commentaries we get from those parts of the state. So I don't know who answered that question, but they can certainly feel free to contact me offline here and talk some more about that.
Harry, anything to add there?
Like everyone, we're looking for commentary from throughout Minnesota, Twin Cities, Metro, and Greater Minnesota, and on a myriad of issues. One of the things that I am looking for is not the political talk, but issues that are affecting individuals in their day-to-day lives that we may not, that, and in fact, sometimes the letters that we get lead to stories on the news side because it's letting us know about something that's close to a community's heart that we weren't aware of. So we appreciate that, and please, like Scott and Mike said, send them our way.
Great. So let's talk about credibility a moment. We touched on this a tiny bit. There's kind of a thread throughout, but what does it mean for a person to be credible in an opinion space? I mean, because that doesn't always come with somebody's title or their credentials or whatever, but what does it mean to be credible? What are you looking for there?
I mean, with us, once again, because we have the, and I'll say it as an advantage of being an online publication, we are able to cite sources right there in front of you. So when someone's providing an opinion, we can verify their credibility instantly. A lot of people that are contributing are not political figures. They're not public figures. They're the average person. They're the average Minnesotan. And so when we're able to take that average Minnesotan and then provide backup to sustain their argument or their opinion, to me, that helps to make it credible. And sometimes I'll get submissions and I'll say, oh, this looks good. And I'll email the person back and say, can you send me your links? And then that way I can put the links in and run the piece.
I would add to that by saying, one, are they writing from something they know? Do you have experience on this thing that you want to have an opinion about? And then the other really crucial one, which I think happens not nearly often enough, is have they considered the best arguments of people who disagree with them as they're writing this opinion piece? I've had so many conversations like that, and sometimes they're really productive. It happens. I can think of one candidate from a couple of years ago who had to submit 3 times before the piece got at what I think of as an honest argument. The honest argument, in my opinion, the credible argument, has fully considered, doesn't have to make the case, doesn't have to be comprehensive, but has fully considered the best arguments of the other side. And that just makes it stronger. So I think that's a really important piece of credibility too. But the first thing I'm looking for is, do you know whereof you speak? And what's the evidence of that?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that question as well. I think Harry and Mike touched on a number of points I would touch on. But I'll also say that, there are times where, especially with efforts to find more first-time writers, where we will try to talk some with that writer, learn a little bit more about who he or she is, where they come from, what they do, before we sign off on publishing a piece. Doesn't happen much with letters, but with fuller commentaries, we have that. We also have a process where commentary writers need to sign off on kind of an agreement with us that before publication, the first time they submit to us, that explains what we do, explains that the editing is up to us, and it also tells them that they own the piece and after it's published. So we go through that process, and we tend to learn a little bit about who people are during that. Not saying we've never gotten burned, because we've had our hiccups, both with commentary writers, but probably more so with letter writers, where somebody's later said, "Are you sure that's who they said they were?" Fortunately, knock on wood, it's not often. And typically, when we've checked them out, they've been okay. But their credibility is really important, and trying to vet people as much as you can ahead of time is important. We don't do criminal background checks on everybody, unless it's relevant. for some reason.
I wondered about that one because there was
Yeah.
one recently where somebody's criminal background, which in my opinion didn't have anything to do with the piece, but Twitter went crazy.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Don't necessarily have to go. So that's a good sort of lead into to another question that that Aaron had. So the way opinion pieces sort of zing rapidly around social media versus just being read, you know, daily in the actual physical paper, does that affect you know, how you publish or who you publish, or because those things have more than just a day of lifespan?
We'll let my colleagues here go
Um,
first.
I don't know necessarily if I'm getting at the heart of the question, but when it comes to how a piece might move or something of that nature, I just always tend to think, and I've thought this even before social media, but what we do, our words are permanent, and the words that we publish are permanent. We are as much journalists as we are historians. And if you look at it that way, then you are making sure that you're keeping an honest historical record for people to come years, decades, centuries after you. And so that's kind of how I look at it, is making sure that the record of the time is as accurate as possible. And then, like Scott,
Uh-oh.
I don't
yeah.
live in the comments at all. I stay away from them as much as possible.
Was there somebody else who wanted to weigh in on that one?
I had a little freeze up there, but let me jump in. I
Okay.
hope I don't freeze up again. Yeah, I don't, you know, we're aware of it. The fact that, you know, anything we publish is going to be discussed and widely disseminated. And the more, usually the more timely or hotly debated the issue, you know, the more you're gonna see in terms of that engagement online. Aware of it, but not driven by it, either positively or negatively, particularly. Once in a while, we get surprised by something that we didn't necessarily expect. But generally, we have a pretty good sense when we go into it, if a piece is going to be, you know, get really high readership. So again, not something that drives our decision making, but we are aware of it.
Same here.
Awesome. Okay. So one thing that we haven't talked about yet is political endorsements, which is one of the most recognizable functions of editorial boards. Even though it's something you do a tiny portion of the year, but people talk about it a lot. Does your paper do endorsements, and why or why not?
We don't, because we're nonprofit.
We don't anymore. We used to do a ton of them, and we don't now. I mean, my approach on it in the early days, my early days in St. Paul 15 years ago, when we did them, was we wanted them to be more informative rather than more opinion. Of course, we gave our opinion. We don't do them now because to do them well, you gotta put a heck of a lot into them, and at the moment we're just too thin to do it. So rather than do a lousy job, we don't do endorsements.
Yeah, we're as many of you know, we're still in the game. Every time we get to an election cycle, we discuss it and discuss whether or not we want to stay in it. There are pros and cons. But during the time I've been with Opinion, we have continued to do them, sometimes really thoroughly and with a lot of races covered, sometimes with somewhat fewer, staying with the more competitive races. Because as Mike points out, to do it well, it's time consuming. And this last city election cycle in St. Paul and Minneapolis, we were really active. We felt like we needed to be, because we thought that some of the questions faced by the voters were really more critical than they have been in some time. And so we put a ton of time into it, a lot of research, a lot of discussions with the candidates, all virtual because of COVID, which in some ways made us more efficient, but in other ways was less enjoyable, I think, than when we get to meet with people in the past. I tend to think that we have the most, people ask, well, do you have impact? How important is that to you? It's important that to me that we make smart cases for whoever we endorse. And then it's also really important to me that we run counterpoints from people who feel differently. And then at the end of an election cycle, if we can look back and say the voters were better informed because of the news coverage the Star Tribune did, separate from us, but also because of the opinion coverage that we provided, pro or con on a given candidate or a given city amendment proposal, then I feel good about it. And I think, but in terms of having impact, I tend to think, having done this for a long time, that we have more impact when we're writing about city races, especially those that maybe the readers haven't been exposed to as much. When we weigh in on the first district congressional race, we might not have as much impact. So, with the midterms coming up, we're talking right now about how we're going to do it again and how we're going to approach it, and haven't really made any final decisions. But I feel like we have a lot of opinions. We do more than 400 editorials a year and lots of commentary and letters, and public policy is important in Minnesota. And there's some of these questions where I think we have something to say. And then as long as we're open to the other side, which I think consistently we try to be, then I feel good about it.
Awesome. So Leah has a question. Do you have any advice on locating the best journalist or editor to send content to, as either original content or press releases? I feel like we should just put a link in all of here to to each of your websites.
Well, yeah, for us, if you're sending your commentary, you can send it to voices@MinnPost.com, and I'll put that in the chat as well. Yeah, I one of my pet peeves at any outlet I've been is when people, and so I appreciate the question, when people are submitting, know to whom you're submitting. Don't send sports release to the business editor, and vice versa. It's like sometimes I see it a lot, but anyway, voices@MinnPost.com, and then if you want to submit something just general, you can send it to me, and I can put my email in the chat as well, hcolbert@post.com, and then I can kind of help route you.
And it looks like Scott put this contact information in there.
I put two links in the conversation thread, in the chat thread. One is to a guide that we have, and you can find that on the website at Star Tribune Opinion. And it's a guide to editorial and commentary, explains a little bit more of what we're looking for. Just so you're aware, we're currently updating that, and I think we're going to publish the refresh version here in about a month. But it's fine. It's generally good, but we want to update it a little bit, freshen it up. And then I put the link there for submissions for commentaries or letters as well, which is by far the best way to get something to us. Everything gets read. That I can guarantee people. We don't reply to every letter writer, every commentary writer. We let people know within 10 days to 2 weeks if we're going to run their commentary. Usually it's much quicker than that. So we'll get back to people. And then some people will contact us and say, well, are you taking it or not? And we try to respond to all of them as well. But it's kind of hard to keep up with the flow with everybody.
So you've been dressed down too, huh? Yeah, I've gotten several emails from someone who apparently I haven't gotten back to in their estimation of due time. And I will add this also. like Scott said, we get a ton of letters, commentary submissions. So it's a small staff. It takes time to go through all of these. So please just be patient.
Shannon, was the question? I'm not sure I understood the question. Was it about tips for getting in, or tips for finding the best ones?
Do you have any advice on locating the best journalist or editor to send content to?
Oh, okay.
And that would be either original content or like press releases.
Got it.
Okay, and we dealt with the how long to wait. Jay has a question. With your product or content, what are you trying to change or improve or create that you haven't yet? That's an interesting question.
I'll jump in there. I mentioned this new voices feature, really want to see that do great this year. So that's something where I hope that we have more and more first-time writers of commentary, and that at the end of 2022, when we look back, it's a really deep and interesting and diverse set of voices, different in terms of political orientation, different in terms of the makeup of the writers, where they come from, who they are, age. Hope we maybe get more younger writers engaged, and we're going to try to do that. So that's really just continuing to try to publish more and more good opinion journalism, and that would be that's our priority. We're going to take, we're trying right now to do pretty consistent editorial writing about policing reforms. And we had an editorial I'm pretty proud of a couple Sundays ago on how police departments judge character in recruiting candidates. And we talked to the St. Cloud chief and looked at what Duluth does. And we're going to try to be as constructive as we can be on that, because it's obviously a really, really important question in policing throughout the state of Minnesota. So that's a topic area that we're really interested in, and people, I don't have a problem saying that. Last year and the year before, a lot of pandemic, including a series we did called Our Best Shot, where we tried to address the vaccine hesitancy from a range of reasons, from people who have fear of needles to some of the folks in our communities of color who have some really legitimate reasons to question the medical establishment and its the treatment of them and over the decades. And we try to take on those issues and talk to community leaders and then publish what we hoped would be constructive pieces that answered some of the questions people had.
Shannon, I would say just a quick response to that question. We really use only a couple of tools, and I think we could use a couple more. The ones we have are good. They're like a 700 or 800 word commentary by somebody who's representing themselves, or or it's a short letter to the editor. But I think what would be beneficial to serve both what Scott was talking about and getting some more voices in for any of us would be to develop a few more mechanisms for doing that. Anytime you're trying to gather opinions or knowledge or whatever, it takes time, and that's the barrier to this. I spend a lot of time with people who write guest commentaries. We don't publish a single one that I don't have conversations about and edit in some way or another. But if I had more, I would try to develop a few more tools and mechanisms for reflecting broader and even sharper opinion. Work a question with a variety of people and reflect those. So that's something that would be, that I would like to create that we haven't, and maybe someday we will.
One of the
Shannon,
things that,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, you go, because I think you're gonna, if you're talking about this topic, I wanted to ask
Okay.
a question of the attendees, actually.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I'm very much looking forward to doing is diversifying the voice that we get, and doing so proactively. So I've been reaching out to people who I have had either past interactions with, or people who I know in community, and asking them to lend their voice. And so I'm not just waiting on whatever we get, we get. I want to make sure that we're diverse in covering our Black communities, our Hmong communities, our Somali communities, our LGBTQ plus communities. So I want to make sure that there's a great diversity of voice, and that's where I think we can truly grow and have a much more fruitful conversation if we're diversifying the voice. And what I tell a lot of people, and this even goes on our news side, when we're talking about diversity, I don't want a Black person just to be able to talk about quote unquote Black issues. You don't have to be of something and only have that skill set or that quote unquote expertise just because you're of something. If you are a scientist and you just happen to be one of our indigenous brothers and sisters, we want you to talk about the science and things of that nature. And with your diversity of self, that will bring the perspective.
That's cool. Scott, you had a question for our audience.
I did. And it kind of relates to the question of new tools and new ways of engaging our audience. And that would be chats. And I wondered about online chatting, and whether our audience would find it beneficial for us to do more of those. And they could be on specific topics. I've got folks who in my group who have expertise in areas. Jill Burkham on healthcare, Patricia Lopez on state government and politics, Denise Johnson on education and city issues, and John Rash on international affairs. Guy's been all over the world and spent a lot of time in his past learning about international issues. Would the audience, would people who are attending here, would they find that beneficial for us to do a noon, chat with Jill Burkham about what's next at the pandemic? Now, I picked maybe a bad topic there since it's kind of quieting. But I tend to be a reader of those at other publications. My own news organization hasn't valued them quite as much. But that doesn't mean that we can't do them in opinion. So I'm just curious whether people would find those valuable to be able to actually interact in online chat format with opinion staffers.
Yeah, why don't we put the questions in the chat to talk about the chat?
Yeah.
If you would find that interesting or relevant or helpful.
Folks can email me too if they want to.
There you go.
Share their thoughts. It's not getting a resounding response here, so.
People may still be eating their lunch.
Yeah, that's right. I hope so.
Yes. Yep. See, here come the things.
Yeah. Okay.
You read the comments. I also read the comments. Whatever. Jan had a question. We're getting close to time, but Jan had a question. As we get deeper into political season, have you considered doing an early piece for each election to help describe what to look for and what's important in a candidate? For example, what are the qualities a great attorney general needs? What duties do they have, and what experience is important?
I saw the question in the chat, so I was actually away from the Zoom looking for a link, because I know that, and I'm trying to find it, but we do have kind of an early on voters guide that we put out on our MinnPost site. If I can find that link, I'll get it to you. Again, recognizing that we don't endorse a candidate either way, but we put the information out with the individuals who have filed, a little bit about their platform, things of that nature. And then I think we have a second link that has kind of their financials, cash on hand, things of that nature. So I'm looking for that now.
I just would, in response to Jan's question, say we haven't specifically talked about her idea, but we've actually got a meeting next week where we're going to talk about our election approach this year, and I'm gonna throw it out there. It's interesting. We tend to try to get into some of those issues in our actual endorsement editorials, but it could be an interesting thing to do in advance of picking a candidate. Almost like, what are we looking for, and what should Minnesotans be looking for? So it's a good idea.
Awesome. Okay, let's go to what I think is probably going to be the last question. But what's one thing that you wish more people knew about editorial?
If you don't mind, can you give me a little bit more context on that?
I would say, the things that would come to my mind, and granted, my mom was in media as I was growing up, so I've got a little bit of background here, but the difference between editorials and news pieces, or sort of how you get to those things. And it may just be the culmination of, or the accumulation of the things that we've talked about here. But if there's one thing that you guys are like, I wish the general public would know this, what would it be?
How to submit.
How to submit. Okay.
No,
We can help spread that message.
It's in a box on the printed page every day, and it's on the website 24/7. And it amazes me how often people will send me individually an email, and without the contact information we need, and I have to, send the link, and it's fine. Yeah, really. Oh, and the other thing would be, and this is true about commentary and letters too. I wanted to say it before. Any smart person, if they spend a couple of weeks reading what we publish and what Harry publishes and what Mike publishes, they'll start to get a sense of what we're looking for. And sometimes I'll talk to people and it'd be like, have you ever read us? Because it's not clear that, you really understand what it is that we're looking for. If you read us, I think you'll get a better sense. So that's one thing I'd say. If somebody's like, gee, I can't seem to get into the letters, mine just don't get published. Maybe they're really good readers of what we do, but a lot of times they're not. And so I would definitely start there if you haven't already.
Harry, you look like you had a reaction to that.
Absolutely. Oftentimes, and unfortunately, this product of social media and the way society is heading, a lot of times people are just reading the headline that they see scroll across their news feed, and then make some sort of brand leap to think that they know exactly what the story is. And I'm like, did you open the link? Just simply open the link. That's all you have. And so, yes, please just take a look, and you will start to see a familiarity in style and how the content comes about. In terms of understanding editorial, understand that our voices, again, are as diverse as they can be. I can have my own personal opinion, which I do as a human being, but I have to, as an editor, look at someone who's presenting an opinion that I think is the exact opposite of mine, and as long as it has merit and it's backed by some fact, I have an obligation to our readership to publish that editorial or that commentary the same as I would one that is right in line with my thought.
The one thing I would say would be smart people who write things you disagree with are your friend if you're trying to figure things out. And the point of opinion journalism and opinion news is to advance or deepen our understanding of something. And the only way we can understand something is to walk around it and look at it from different angles.
Awesome. Well, we are coming up on the end of the hour. I really want to thank you guys, all three, for taking the time and donating an hour of what is a very busy job to this conversation, and I definitely appreciate it. Want to make sure that we do encourage people on this call and everybody who's listening or watching the replay to support local journalism. Very, very important. Subscribe to these publications. I believe MinnPost is in the middle of the membership drive, right, Harry? Yes, yes.
Absolutely. Yes, we are. And we have a donate button right on our homepage.
Awesome.
Hey, Shannon.
Yes.
Well, sorry, I don't want to get in the way of your wrap up, but I just wanted to shout out to Harry and Mike. I live in St. Paul. I feel like I have to read the Pioneer Press to be as well informed as I can be about what's going on in this side of the river. And with Harry and MinnPost, they do great work. There's a lot of really good journalism there, both news and opinion. And I feel better informed if I read what they do. And we're really fortunate in this state to have as many really good journalists as we do, and in the Twin Cities, Minnesota Reformer and some of the other sites, and Axios and some of the other things. It's a lot of competition, but it also makes for a more informed public. And so really respect the work that Mike does at the Pioneer Press, and Harry and his folks at MinnPost as well.
Thank you so much. And I feel the same. And I don't look at it as competition as much as collaboration on making sure that we have the most informed public possible.
Sure. Thank you. I agree.
Awesome. This is a great media market to live in for consumers, and I think we all win in that situation.